Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection here at BCTV. I'm Representative Mike Mrowicki from Putney. I represent the Windham-4 district of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. And today we have a show which will highlight again some of what's happening in our community and something that we should want to get going around the state. Today's guest is Tim Stevenson of Post Oil Solutions. Tim, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
As somebody who has done a lot of work for years in youth and community development, one of the things I am pleased to see is that this is another outgrowth of community development. You say you've got a background in community organizing, and you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started with Post Oil Solutions?
Well, my background goes back to the late 60s, early 70s, actually. I was I think my first real taste in that was welfare rights organizing, working with welfare recipients on Long Island, helping them organize themselves so that they, in turn, could stand up for their rights, which were being, at that point, very much ignored by the state of New York. And I came to realize that this was a very powerful way of trying to bring about change. Yeah. But my real big thing has been over the last 8.5 years with Post Oil Solutions. And I think that came about largely through a growing awareness and understanding of the growing energy and climate crisis that our country was faced, and realizing that the solution did not rest in large institutions, in our federal government. It actually rested much more in local communities, that the changes that had to take place would only happen here on the local level. And so I got involved with what was then known as a relocalization movement. It has since become known as transition towns, in which the whole focus is on empowering or helping people to empower themselves, to increasingly become more self-sufficient, more collaborative with their neighbors, which to me is the very essence of strong community, of people being able to do things for themselves and do things with their neighbors. I think that is really the essence of any strong community organizing effort and community building.
Mm-hmm. Something that I feel Vermont towns on one level do very well in the smaller towns, but as we get into the bigger towns, I think we tend to splinter a little bit, and that's why I think what you're doing is having an organizing factor here, so people have a place to come and look and see this is a place where community exists. However you define community, too.
Right.
I look at community as, I call them networks of relationships.
That's a good way to put it.
Start on interpersonal relationships right here between us, and how do we build them? How do we create that Venn diagram where the circles are touching each other and interacting? So I appreciate that this is a model. That's certainly something that can be duplicated, and around the state, the transition town movement is doing that, and Putney
has done a very good job. Dummerston, exactly.
Hardwick, Montpelier, all these towns are. So how do we keep connecting the dots? What's happening here in Brattleboro that it's a manifestation of these ideas?
Right. Well, I think you made a point a moment ago, Mike, that really is worth repeating, is that, if I heard you correctly, you said community can exist anywhere. It doesn't have to be literally a community. It can be between two organizations, for example, who work together. Our Winter Farmers Market, which is about to open its 8th season in a few weeks, on November 2nd, I believe it is a community. And people have always commented about it, that it's more than just a place to come and buy some fresh local produce or a nice piece of craft, or to have some nice lunch and listen to me. It's people coming together, and I think that's also true of what happens during the summer with the summer market out on Route 9 in West B. So yeah, community is really where you find it. And I encourage people to see that, because I feel like one of the things that Post Oil has always made a point of is partnering with people, building relationships, and that way you sort of build a foundation for something that grows. And I think that's happened in Vermont, and I think it's happening actually around many places in the country where this is done.
I think Vermont right now has the highest concentration of farmers markets in the state. And again, I think if we provide venues for people to come together and just interact, we're on the road to success in terms of supporting community. One of the things I notice in this country, as we become more spread out, those venues tend not to be there. In Europe, South America, parts of Asia that I know of, and perhaps in Africa as well, cities are designed with common areas. In New England, many towns have common areas where they're made for congregations. There are places in Europe, the plazas, the piazzas, where people come every night to come together. I think farmers markets can serve that same thing. So
I think another thing that's important with building a community, though, Mike, is not just people coming together, but especially from the standpoint of where I'm coming from in terms of trying to bring about change, is people coming together and beginning to do something together. I think action is very, very important. I almost feel like that's the glue that actually keeps people together. You and I begin to work on something together. That's more than just having a good cup of coffee, as fine as that is, but saying, hey, look it. Let's start doing a community garden together. You know, you and I and the neighbors over there, we could do something together. That's the glue that begins to really hold and build, I think, in communities when we come together around action.
A lot of us, when we came to Vermont, built our own houses, and we did it with sweat equity, as they say. And I believe sweat, when people work together, when they sweat together, that builds those bonds that are a little deeper than just sharing a cup of coffee. So I think it's, again, comes down to creating those action pieces. What's happening in terms of what Post Oil Solutions is doing now for action steps?
Well, there are several things. Of course, the winter market, as I mentioned a moment ago, continues. We have a project now that is 2 years old in the greater Bellows Falls area. It encompasses some 7 or 8 towns up there known as, actually the name is changing now from the Greater Falls Community Garden Collaborative to the Food Security Collaborative, because that's what we're really about, is building food security in the area. And that's a project that has a number of features ranging from a series of workshops that we're sponsoring in which we help people learn basic garden skills, putting food by, extending the season, composting, anything around food. The other things that we're doing is we've started 2 new community gardens, and we're doing others, and we're actually a partnership right now of some 10 community gardens in the school and community gardens in the area. We're working with Lisa Pitcher and Our Place, which is the food shelf in Bellows Falls, around the growing food crisis in the area. And helping to come up with plans to mitigate that somewhat. There'll be a food processing project that we'll be doing at Harlow's Farm, for example, again for the 2nd year, in which food is processed and stored and given to the food shelf. Paul Harlow, let me just get a word in for him.
I was just going to say
he is. I don't want to talk about Paul because I tend to gush when I do. He is a great human being and has been so helpful in terms of advancing the local food movement in our region, and is very generous with his farm and his food.
I couldn't agree more, and I think Paul deserves a shout out as much as anyone. A few years ago, I was working for the food bank here, as maybe you know, or other people don't know. That's right,
you were the gleaning person.
That's right, the legislature is a part-time thing in Vermont, so we have to find paying jobs, as we say, in the off-session. And this was the year where we had Tropical Storm Irene. Paul lost $250,000 in crops, but he still continued to donate every week to the food shelves, donating his space for processing. Salvation Farms was doing work with him, and I have to say, starting with Paul helping set up years ago the food network, the organic food network, and continuing to be generous with his time.
Well, that's an example of building community. Paul may never saw it or expressed it that way, but that's what he was doing. As much as growing vegetables and sharing that produce, he was building community in that greater Westminster area.
You bet. And from Paul's perspective, you know, he's shown how that farm has been active since I think more than 100 years
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
And he's keeping that on. His son Evan now is
Yes.
involved.
Well,
and
he's even, I think, taking more property down the road towards Putney.
Yep.
He's a man that just
he really is.
keeps
And
going.
if you've ever seen the operation he has there, it's very impressive.
yeah.
Which leads me to a piece, though, where you were talking about classes, preparation. One of the concerns around food security is storage.
Right.
What's happening?
Well, that's definitely part of what the collaborative is trying to resolve, because that is an issue. Paul, for example, will allow his space to be used, but after all, he's using a lot of it for his own operation.
Sure.
So, and it's his kitchen too, and so that can only be used for in a limited way. So that's a big issue right now that we're trying to resolve, is to develop a sort of a local food hub, if you will, that is able to process and store food. And that is, I think that is one of the most important things in terms of creating greater food security in our region, is to be able to take food, because after all, Paul and other farmers have excess.
Yeah.
And it just gets plowed into the ground or made into compost because they can't sell it, and we've got to find ways to get this food and process it and store it so that it can be used during the winter months or what have you.
And again, Paul, I believe, has shown the model for how it can be done, because his storage facility is pretty much run by his solar panels that he has in his field. Right. So,
well, actually, but that reminds me of one of the projects that we're involved in that Paul sort of is an inspiration for. If you've ever driven by his farm, you see that high tunnel hoop house that he has there.
Yep.
Well, that's another thing that we're trying to develop in communities that will extend the season. It will provide sort of like almost a winter community garden, if you will. And we're looking into trying to do that in a couple of communities over the next year or so.
Well, there's certainly lots of ways where agriculture, our season can be extended.
Yes.
And people like Paul, Jack Mannix in Dummerston at Walker Farm. There's a lot of people who are showing the way.
We have good role models in Windham County.
You bet, yeah. So agriculture is an important piece of this, food security.
Yep.
Beyond that, community is a lot more than that.
Right.
When we talk about what to do, we were just talking about the piece of legislation that you're very interested in moving.
Yep.
If you could speak to that.
The wisdom of at least some of the state legislature last session brought forth a bill, both in the House and the Senate, that would require, if passed and signed by the governor, the state to divest itself of all investments that in companies that extracted, processed, and sold fossil fuels. And this is part of a larger movement that has been going on around the country thanks to Bill McKibben and the 350.org people. Bill McKibben, another Vermonter, wonderful person. And it's one of the ways that we're trying to build a grassroots movement that says to big oil, no, going after the last drop in the ground is not the way to go. It's not good for anyone. It's not going to be good for the planet, and we've got to stop it. And we've got to convince them, and we've got to convince their political allies in Washington to begin to say, no, maybe we shouldn't be supporting big oil. Maybe we should put more money into solar. Maybe we should pass legislation that actually puts a carbon tax on oil. And because the fact of the matter is, and I'm sort of speaking in a gentle way because I know it's a much harsher topic, that we're really we've really run out of time with climate change. And I think the most recent report from the UN about that is indicative of that we have actually a few years. Actually, a year was identified recently by a study that says if we don't make substantial changes between now and 2047, which is, within the lifetime of our children for sure, that the climate is going to change, is going to be at a place where it will no longer go back, and it will continue to get warmer and warmer, and there's nothing we can do about it. So that's, I think, one of the reasons that the Post Oil has gotten involved in this program. And I think the thing that we're particularly interested in is really, again, going back to the whole thing of relationships, of partnerships, of collaborations, is that trying to reach out to different groups to get them involved in this, even if that's not their particular thing. This is the crisis, folks. This is the one that we've got to deal with. Otherwise we're in very deep trouble. So that's something that we're working on. If I can just mention one other thing, Mike, we're on the last Tuesday of the month, which I believe is the 29th, we will be sponsoring the first of what we hope will be several climate change cafes here in Brattleboro. 6 o'clock in the Brooks Library Community Room. And that's an opportunity for people to come by, to talk about how they're feeling about climate change, talking about positive things that can be done about it, because we feel like this is the challenge right now, getting people to come together on a grassroots level and say, wait a minute, yeah, we know it's a problem, and we got to do something about it. And hopefully this will be a step that will help that.
So what's that date again?
I believe it's Tuesday, October 29th, 6 p.m., Brooks Memorial Library. There'll be light refreshments available, though people are encouraged to bring anything they'd like to share. And it'll be what we call a facilitated conversation. In other words, it'll be somewhat informal, but it's not going to be just a lot of disparate conversations. I will be facilitating the way so that if you start to say something, we listen to you and we follow up on you and not just say, oh, okay, I want to talk about something else now. So that people do feel heard and received there. And I think that's very important because I think a lot of people have feelings about climate change that are hard to express because they feel like, oh, I don't want to be seen as one of those people, you know, one of those extremists or whatever climate activists are seen as. So anyway,
if there's a big group, will it be broken out into, say, a World Cafe kind of format?
Well, you know, it's a work in progress, and that's a possibility. I think all possibilities are open. Yeah, I think that's in fact, I think the initial meeting will be to explore how this can be. To bring people together and let the people that come sort of begin to shape and develop, which is, of course, 101 community organizing. You come in with an idea, but you let that idea be run with by the people who are interested in it.
Yeah. Who can be part of this?
You could, Mike. We're very open, and I think
so. That means anybody,
right? Anyone can be involved, and in fact, what people usually like is just not a sort of an open invitation because they say, "Oh my God, what am I getting into?" It's am I going to have to sign my life away? So I would suggest this: that for anyone who's interested in the work of Post Oil Solutions, who's interested in has a particular thing they'd like to do, to contact me, and I'll give my contact information in a minute. Or we could suggest something very specific, like we could definitely use help at the winter market, for example. We could definitely use help with a number of the projects that I've mentioned up in Novellas Falls area. In fact, right now, we're looking for people who would like to do workshops on food. And we're even willing to pay $50 for 2 hours. So it's, it's an interesting deal. Again, get in touch with me, and my phone number is 802-869-2141, and my email address is info@postoilsolutions.org. Post Oil Solutions just run together. So contact me, and I will be either happy to suggest something if that's what you'd like, or entertain an idea that you may have. Some of our best ideas have come from people saying, hey, I'd love to do this. And we say, run with it. We'll support you.
Great. All right, any of these events going to be televised by BCTV, or are you open to that if they want to?
We're certainly open to it. It's not something that has been addressed. Is BCTV capable of televising or doing what we're doing now, making a remote
you bet they can,
from the library?
They're doing a lot of select board meetings, different committee
I know they do.
meetings in
That's right.
different
They do
towns.
so.
And I have to say, it's a shout out to BCTV because they just keep expanding. Core Trowbridge has been doing some great work. Jeff, Roland, they've been working hard to build community through this medium.
Right. Well, that's great media when you have strong community media, and BCTV I've been aware of for many years, and I feel like it's definitely one of the good institutions in our area.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate is when we do our work in Montpelier during our 16-week session, it feels far away for a lot of people. Even though I tell them it's a 2-hour ride, it's a really nice ride, come on up anytime, we'll give you the 10-cent tour. And you can see really democracy in action. It's an open building. And you know, with a part-time citizen legislature, it works differently. It actually works as opposed to what's happening in Washington. But absent people being able to make that trip, we try and do reports from Montpelier. We do this, and what BCTV is helping doing is making those connections hopefully a little stronger and bridging that distance for people. And that's why what I see it now is hopefully helpful, so you can get the word out for the good work you're doing, or lots of people around town. Are there other things going forward you'd like to do that you need more people? Or?
Well, you know, actually, it's interesting. We're going through a transition period right now.
No pun intended, right?
Right, no pun intended. One of the features of Post Oil Solutions is that we develop projects, initiate projects, but we try not to own them. So that once they reach a certain stage of development, we want them to go free. And that has happened recently. It happened this spring with 3 of our projects. The Farm to School program that we had, the neighborhood market on what was formerly on Elliott Street, but now on Green Street. Excuse me. And our buying club that we have in the Brattleboro schools. So the 3 of them have become an independent project, and they're in the process of seeking their own 501c3 under the name of Food Connects. Really interesting project. But once a project reaches a program level and has its own dynamics, then we really need to set it free, because it really isn't good for us as a community organizing project to at the same time try to be funding and supporting programs. And that's what Food Connects is now. It's a really full-blown program. So I would say that that's what we hope that the Food Security Collaborative in the Greater Bellows Falls area becomes its own independent entity. We've recently gotten a $10,000 grant from the Ben & Jerry's Foundation. We've gotten smaller grants from the New England Grassroots Environmental Fund. We're subcontracted actually right now to do food security work by the Greater Falls Prevention Coalition. So that's beginning to grow, and someday we're hopeful that it too can, be out there on its own, and we can be doing other things. So I think we're sort of in a I don't know what you call it, a developmental stage where we're, I think our major effort right now is around climate change and around the kinds of things that I mentioned, whether it's the divestment campaign, the Climate Change Cafe, building partnerships and relationships with other organizations, especially with 350.org.
Yeah. Not to put you on the spot, but I will.
Okay.
And hopefully not in a way that isn't easy for you to answer, but great work going on, good ideas. What do you say to the person who has a family, has work, love to get involved, but gosh, how am I going to fit that into my life? What kinds of things can you say to that?
Well, you're talking about a large part of the population, and the first thing I would do was to indicate that I heard what that person said and was totally accepting and sympathetic to it, because I feel like that's their situation, and for me to sit there and judge it unfairly would be a terrible mistake. And then I would suggest, what do you think you can do in terms of conversation with your family about what can the family do? What could you do with talking to neighbors when that situation allows to happen? I don't think you have to be a full-time activist to be an activist. Doing things within the family, within the neighborhood, it could be nothing more than if you happen to have the skill to write a letter to the editor, you send a letter to the Commons or the Reformer expressing how you feel about a relevant issue. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but I never would suggest to a person who says, my life is beyond me, I can't do anything, you should put that aside and dedicate to what I think is really important. But I would try to explore with them the things that they might consider doing, hey, yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
I could have a talk with the kids and my spouse about what we might do to become more energy efficient, how we might eat more local food. I mean, that's a conversation at the dinner table.
Yeah, yeah. So it all helps.
It all helps.
Yeah.
Everything helps.
Yep.
There's no such thing as, you know, a certain action is the only legitimate one and the others are irrelevant. That's what I try to tell people, that you don't have to go and do civil disobedience on tar sands, for example, to be considered a relevant activist. Yeah. If you wrote a letter to the editor, or if you talk with your neighbor about doing a garden together, man, you're doing it.
Yeah. Your last statement there contains a piece of information, though, that's controversial right now in this country. Fracking,
Yeah.
something that we've banned in Vermont
Right.
here, and something I was proud to support. Hopefully the rest of the nation will follow. But there are people who are saying, this is our bridge to energy security. This is our impetus for economic growth. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that it's really an illusion because, I mean, to use the cliche of the activist movement, it's not a bridge, it's a gangplank. Because, in fact, the act of fracking itself uses an enormous amount of water, which, by the way, is another crisis that we're on the cusp of here. It pollutes that water, groundwater. There are many people that have experienced this. The methane that is released is many times more potent than regular carbon dioxide.
And gets into the water,
and
too,
gets
right?
into the water.
Yeah.
So the whole fracking thing is really not a good practice. Furthermore, it's going to be short-lived. That gas is not going to last more than 20, 25 years. And then we're going to be in that back to where we were 10 years ago when oil peaked, conventional oil peaked. All the unconventional oils that are being touted as the way to go, heavy oil, tar sands, fracked gas, have very serious environmental consequences and will only exacerbate the climate situation. They're not going to make things better.
Yeah. Many of us in the legislature continue to espouse that our energy future lies in conservation and efficiency, that the cheapest and the cleanest energy is the energy we don't have to produce.
Oh, you got it.
Is Post Oil Solutions involved in?
We're not like, say, Paul Cameron and the folks here with the Energy Committee which are doing, that's great work. Yeah. I'm trying to be more involved in that on a very local level in my little town of Athens by trying to promote this. But no, Post Oil is not involved in that, but we fully support that and totally agree with the statement that you just made. Because efficiency and conservation, you can't beat them. And I feel like what government should, as much as I would love to see them subsidize more solar and wind, I think, especially here in Vermont, providing more funds so that Vermonters could tighten up their homes. Yeah. Boy, you get more bang for the buck, I feel that way, than any other way. I think that's great.
I think we're moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Many of us in the legislature would like to put some real money on the table, and real money in terms of money that's going to be in the budget that has a viable source, and use that money because the long-term payoff is really there for winterizing our homes here in Vermont and across New England as well. Right. So hopefully we can move forward on that. Now, we've got a few minutes left. Are there events coming up soon you'd like people to know about?
Well, I've mentioned the Climate Cafe, and I've mentioned the Post Oil meeting. Our winter market opens on Saturday, November 2nd, and will be open every single Saturday from there until the last Saturday in March.
Now, do you have all the vendors you need for that?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, so have you had to limit that?
Yes, I mean, the space, as you well know, Mike, at the River Garden, while it's wonderful to have that space being in the heart of Brattleboro as it is limited. Yeah. And yes, we've had to say no, unfortunately, to applicants. We have a priority system in which our original vendors come first, and then our older vendors. So, but we try to accommodate as many as possible, especially farmers, because that's what it's all about. We really want to be a true farmers market, although we also very much appreciate the crafters that come in with their pottery and jewelry and other things like that, because they attract customers who then go by the farms, one of the farmers, and say, "Oh, let's get some cabbage, let's get some potatoes or squash today."
And I know we've Amelia Struthers and I have played music there and enjoyed the
That's
ambiance.
where I've seen you. I knew I'd seen you before.
Yep. And it's like being in a town square. People coming with their kids, whole families, people of all ages. Having a gathering place and certainly featuring lots of local
Well, it goes back to what we were talking earlier about community and how that takes place in a variety of venues and in a number of ways.
So that'll be starting, what are the hours for that?
From 10 to 2.
10 to 2.
10 to 2.
And in the River Garden?
In the River Garden.
Beautiful downtown Brattleboro?
Beautiful.
Again, we'll be closing soon. People want to get in touch with you. Who are some other people, too, they can get in touch with?
Well, there's my wife who runs the Winter Farmers Market, Sherry Marr, and she can be contacted at the same phone number. The woman who is running our program up north in the Bellows Falls area, her name is Carrie Gibson, and kgibson@yahoo.com. And she'd love to hear from anyone who is interested in doing a workshop that I mentioned earlier for $50 for a 2-hour gig. She would also be interested in people who want to be involved in starting a community garden up in that area, or an organization that would like to do that. So she's a key person as well.
Great. Well, Tim, thanks for your work. Thanks for taking the time to share some of it with people out there.
No bother, as they say in Ireland.
And good luck in all the future endeavors, too.
Thank you very much, Mike. Nice being with you.
Thank you. Well, that's it for another edition of Montpelier Connection. Appreciate again all the people at BCTV who helped make this possible, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take care.